Welcome to Bake to the Future, the podcast where we take a forward-looking perspective on the baking industry. I'm your host, Jennifer Kohlfeldt, Vice President of Operations and Membership at the American Bakers Association. Fresh into the new year, we're going to spend today looking ahead into 2024 and exploring the anticipated advocacy and political landscape. Joining us today, we have ABA President and CEO Eric Dell, as well as Rasma Zvaners, ABA's Vice President of Government Relations. Both Eric and Rasma have been actively involved in shaping ABA's strategic plan for the year, offering valuable perspectives on what lies ahead for the industry at both the federal and state levels. Eric and Rasma, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. Looking forward to the conversation.
Great to be here.
So, as we look to the next 12 months and 2024 priorities, I'd love to get your thoughts. Specifically, how labor market dynamics are affecting the baking industry and what strategies businesses adopt to address those workforce challenges.
Well, I'll talk a little bit about, obviously, our strategic plan is heavily focused on labor and workforce and workplace and what we're going to be doing in that space, which we'll be announcing that final strategic plan here very soon. So it will play into this question very well. But what I would say is that as I go around and visit with members, I am seeing that folks are a little more than last year, or a little more than when I started a year ago, seeming to be able to find employees a little easier and keep those employees. That retention seems to be on a better trajectory for businesses to be able to keep those employees that they have, and they don't seem to be moving around as much. So that's a good trend on the labor market for what I'm seeing on the ground when I'm visiting with bakers and allied members across the country, which shapes obviously what Rasma and our GR team, what we're doing on the GR side on the labor front. So we will use the labor impacts that we're seeing to guide us and to guide our strategy on the government relations side. That's just a little bit of what I'm seeing out across the country as I'm visiting with members, that it seems to be leveling off a little bit in the labor area. Not to say that it's resolved, but I feel like it's a little bit of leveling in that space. Rasma, you want to talk a little bit about maybe what we're doing in the workforce space and some of the impacts you're seeing at Department of Labor in different areas?
Sure. I think, under this administration, we've had an awful lot of activity from the Department of Labor, and I suspect any day now we will have the final independent contractor rule that left the review of OMB this week. So by the time this podcast is actually out, we will likely have a final rule that we'll be, working through. I think there's also opportunity for us in this space. We have an opportunity to weigh in with members of Congress, in particular on the House side, as some of these rules go final, with the impact that they are having more broadly on our sector. We've worked closely with many business-oriented coalitions and will continue to do so in this space as well as we go into 2024.
Yeah, the other thing I would add is that ABA recently did some research in this space around workforce. In the baking industry, specific to the baking industry. And I think it showed we're going to have a shortfall in 2030 of around 50,000 employees. So this is where we start our work in that space of, hey, we're going to be 50,000 employees short for being able to produce the food that we need in 2030 for the country. So it's important. And that's where we're going to start our work, is from that baseline and say, how do we help reduce that number and help make sure we have enough employees and folks in the labor market to create the food that's needed on the baked goods side in the country.
So following up, as we talk through workforce, something that often works together with workforce is technology and innovation. And so I'd love to get your thoughts on sort of what those trends or advancements might look like over this next year.
Rasma, any thoughts on that? I'm happy to chime in with what I'm seeing across the country after you.
No, I think this is an opportunity for us to look at how we can improve things. Innovation and technology advancements are always huge, not just for the baking sector, but more broadly. It's an opportunity for us to take our workforce and further educate them and train them to be able to do better and different types of work for the baking sector. So I'm actually excited to see where some of these trends go and where our members are headed.
Well, what I would say, if you're not innovating, you're not winning, or you're not even keeping up, right? So a lot of the places I'm visiting, I'm seeing a lot of robotics. But I think what we have to watch is that innovation and automation does not always mean that we're removing jobs from the marketplace. We're actually taking jobs and maybe moving them around based on what skill level we need and so forth. But and some of the robotics and technology advancements are doing things that a lot of the workers don't want to do. Or might not be interested in doing, and doing them in a better way that's more efficient. And we can actually take those employees that were doing those jobs and move them up and educate, have an opportunity to further educate those employees and bring, make their job maybe even more enjoyable to them. So it's not always just innovation or automation means we're removing jobs, because we're not.
So taking a step back a little bit away from workforce, away from operations inside the plants, have you seen notable shifts in terms of consumer preferences? Do you see any changing consumer demands for this upcoming year?
Rasma, I'll jump in on this one. I think our Life Through the Lens of Baking study that we recently did, I think that was last year or within the last year, we'll be keep continually updating that annually on what the trends are in baking. But I think what you'll see in that is there's certain categories like donuts are really doing well now.
They are.
In the growth in the donut space. So a lot of the sweet goods seem to be doing well. I think in-store bakeries and grocery seem to be doing very well and growing as well. We see trends there. So just watching those trends within bakeries and in-store bakeries and grocery, donuts and other sweet goods. I think that's some of the major trends that you'll see in our Life Through the Lens of Baking that we're seeing, and that's reflective in our membership at ABA.
It is.
As it keeps diversifying, right, Jen?
It does. It keeps growing, and our bakers continue to diversify their products. And we certainly have a lot more sweet good bakers than we used to. So,
and smaller baker members too.
Agreed. So with the baker membership growing over 50% over the past few years, we certainly see a very diverse company set in terms of the membership. So
absolutely.
So Rasma, drilling down a little bit into what's expected in Washington this year, I wonder if you could share with us what's on the horizon with the FDA, given its recent restructuring and the new Deputy Commissioner for Human Foods.
Sure. Thanks, Jen. I guess just to sort of set the groundwork a little bit, last September, Jim Jones began serving as a Deputy Commissioner for Human Foods. And this is a position that came out of the Reagan-Udall expert panel that provided specific guidance to FDA and recommendations after the restructuring was initiated. We recall that a lot of the challenges came out of the infant formula recall that unfortunately the nation struggled with. But in December of last year, just before the end of the year, FDA did provide an update on its efforts to create a unified human foods program. And that includes a couple of different things. They're looking more closely at a proposal that's currently being reviewed by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. And the launch date is expected to be probably mid-2024, maybe a little bit later. But there are several elements that I think came out of the December announcement that are very important for the food sector and in particular the baking sector. Within that announcement, making FDA's human foods program and product centers will be solely responsible for receiving, triaging, and dealing with consumer and whistleblower complaints. Prior to that, the role had been split between two different centers within FDA and also the field offices. So this will all be consolidated into one place. And they've also gone ahead, and what was called the Office of Regulatory Affairs has now been renamed as the Office of Inspection and Investigation. And this will play a key role in the front line of how FDA deals with their field-based inspections, their overall inspections, and also dealing with import issues for food. So I think those are three things to keep in mind. I will say, there are other changes coming, but I do want to highlight that all along, as the FDA has gone through this restructuring process, the priorities for the Human Foods Program moving into this year remain and are very much focused on preventing foodborne illness, enhancing food chemical safety, and improving nutrition. And as ABA, we have had a very good working relationship with the FDA. And as these reorganization efforts move forward, we'll continue to engage in a dialogue with FDA, both as the association on its own and also through resources such as the Food Beverage Issue Alliance.
Yeah, and I will say, Rasma, adding on to that, we've been able to be on calls with the Deputy Commissioner already, who seems very willing and open to working with industry and listening to industry as well as consumer groups, and just very open to working together. So we're hoping for a positive relationship there, as we've had for years with FDA. As a lot of folks know, Congress changes and the legislative side changes every 2 years, 4 years, right?
Exactly.
But a lot of the folks at the agencies don't change for many years.
Correct.
So having those positive relationships with agencies is important to associations and important to the baking industry, that we keep those strong and we work with them to find solutions when we have challenges.
Absolutely. So with that in mind, beyond the FDA, are there other regulatory shifts or compliance issues that you see that we should be mindful of over this coming year?
So we will see in the beginning, probably in the first quarter, second quarter of 2024, USDA will be issuing its updated school nutrition program. So that's something to watch from USDA. I think otherwise, I do anticipate that FDA will continue focusing on a lot of the guidance documents that have been in the works so far. I'm also hopeful that with the change in leadership at FDA, that some of these things will be facilitated and moved more quickly. It's unfortunate in some cases, some of these guidance documents we've been waiting for many, many years.
I see.
Also, the dietary guidelines at USDA, right, Rasma?
Those actually will be in 2025. They continue to meet and negotiate through the calendar year. They will have a report ready at the end of 2024. We will be working through the grain chain, as we have been through the process so far, and continuing to weigh in. And then those will be issued in 2025.
I do wonder, what trends are you seeing more at the state level?
I think the state is something that we have to watch very closely. Last year, there was a regulation that actually started as a legislation in California that banned certain ingredients that are used in the food sector. And this is a state level law that now goes into effect. And it's concerning because it's different than where FDA's policy has been with respect to these same ingredients. FDA is reviewing most of the ingredients, and I believe with one of them, brominated vegetable oil, they did actually put out a notice before the end of last year that they plan to ban that, but are taking some public comment on it. So I think the landscape there is watching what's happening in some of these states where they're taking on initiatives that run counter to what the FDA has been doing. I'm hopeful we'll have some more insight when we meet with FDA as the Food Beverage Issue Alliance at the end of January. I know one of the topics that will be on that agenda will be talking a little bit more about what happened in California and how FDA plans to engage, because I do expect to see similar legislation posed, actually probably starting very much this month, Pennsylvania, New York, Illinois. So something that's certainly not going away. I think the other area we're negotiating and working through is also on packaging. Packaging remains, we have 4 states that are in the regulatory process. Just in January, a few days ago, California issued its regulations on different definitions and how packaging will be impacted for the state regulatory process there. We continue to leverage our resources through AmeriPen, but both of those issues will be taking up a lot of bandwidth and have an impact for our members as we move further through the calendar year.
And I would add that the state is really important to really echo what Rasma was saying is
Yes.
things can move really quickly. Good things or bad things can move
Right.
really quickly at the state level. They move a lot slower at the federal level usually, especially with the dynamic of having the close party numbers between Republicans and Democrats in the House and Senate in D.C. But things move quickly at the state level, and you're going to see ABA is going to be stepping up, and we're going to be working more directly at the state level at a higher level. And you'll see some movement there soon, especially around our work that we're going to do with the strategic plan.
Absolutely. And it's also interesting how state level activities can often influence federal level activities as well.
Totally.
So
Absolutely.
the sort of trickle up effect, if you will.
Well, and when you can't, this builds on what you were saying, Jen, but when you can't get things done in Washington, you go to the states.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, and I think the downside of that is that depending on how many states take those initiatives, it does create a patchwork of compliance obligations, and that's challenging, in particular when you provide product that goes nationwide. It's difficult to have different sets of regs depending on where you're shipping certain things or manufacturing certain things.
This is another value of being involved in ABA and being a member of ABA. We can work with our partner associations in D.C. as we tackle these state issues, the National Confectioners Association, working some of these issues, right, Rasma, and CBA and some of the other folks on the state level. So another value is our network here in D.C. within the association world to tackle these so that we can be bigger and better together.
Absolutely. Which that actually ties in really great to the next topic, which is Farm Bill. As you both are very well aware, it was extended into late 2024. So I wondered what insights you might have in terms of what that looks like moving forward.
Yeah, I think, I keep getting this question, and the Farm Bill certainly remains a priority for the baking sector. And, the tea leaves are difficult to read. But I do know a couple of things, Jen, as you mentioned, last year, Congress did pass an extension that will allow the Farm Bill negotiations to continue through September of this year, 2024. And while we have additional time to continue working with Congress to educate them on the baking sector's Farm Bill priorities, including the sugar program and the food nutrition programs such as SNAP, there are several dynamics at play that are beyond our control. While the leaders of the House and Senate Ag committees have committed to moving the negotiations forward, we're also in an election year. And it will be interesting to see if we are able to wrap up a Farm Bill and have something in place prior to the presidential conventions kicking off later this year. I've read some rumors that perhaps if we're unable to move it quickly enough that, this may be further pushed into an additional extension that would take it into 2025. Historically, that's not uncommon. That has happened before, where it has moved through several congressional cycles before they've actually finalized a Farm Bill. But we also have some other dynamics at play that will likely anticipate further debate as well. We already know that the House in particular is pushing for further cuts or restrictions around such programs as SNAP, where the Senate has a slightly different opinion. So we'll continue to weigh in and we'll continue to monitor this as it moves forward.
Okay. And I'd say we appreciate all the ABA members who came to our Farm Bill fly-in. What was that, in July?
Yep.
July of last year, where we worked this issue and took our members to the Hill. So that was really helpful to have the members here to tell their stories on how it impacts them directly, especially the sugar program and other conservation programs in the ag space, included in the Farm Bill and SNAP Choice as well.
For sure. Yeah, having them hear directly from constituents is really impactful.
That's how it works, right?
It is. That's the American system. So we then also had another fly-in in the fall, and during that event, we spoke with members of Congress about tax extenders. They would provide continued tax incentives for bakers and allies as well. I wondered if you had any insight into where that's headed. Do we have an outlook for that this year?
Yeah, so I think I'll take that one, Rasma, if that's all right. So we've been working closely with the National Association of Manufacturers. They're really spearheading this effort, I would say, on the three tax extenders. And those are taxes that are I'll call them tax breaks that were in place that are phasing out. To be beginning to phase out. So those are around R&D expensing, interest deductibility, and accelerated depreciation are the main three. Some important work that we did at the fly-in, as you mentioned, Jen, on these issues was really listening to the congressional offices as to where that is and finding champions in that space from telling our story. I think there are some things that the Democrats want, which is not new to DC. Democrats want certain things, Republicans want certain things, and hopefully you can come together with a bill. We're hearing good things. We hosted a meet and greet here at ABA for Congressman Estes, who is working on this issue in December. He seems to think we're making great headway to getting some of these tax extenders resolved and getting a win across the finish line in the next couple months. And it would just be tremendous for not only the baking industry but manufacturers in general. American corporations and businesses spend a lot of money on R&D, and R&D is important. You talked about automation and transformation and looking to the future. R&D is a big part of that to make sure that we can automate and reach the next level that we need to be competitive. So we are following these tax issues. We're working with NAM. We're working with a lot of other associations in this space. They're important to business, and we'll keep everyone updated as we move forward with them. But we're hopeful in the next couple months we can see some movement on them in a positive way.
Okay.
In a tight Congress, in a really tight Congress, as we know. But the good thing is many of these a couple of these tax provisions have, they're bipartisan.
Yes.
Which is helpful.
Yes, it is. So one other topic that we talked about at the fly-in was a baking caucus. I wondered if you wouldn't mind explaining to those who don't know what a caucus is and what it is that our ask is there.
There are caucuses in Congress on the House side primarily that deal with helping educate members of Congress on different industries. Members of Congress come from different backgrounds. Most of them do not know the baking industry. Most of them don't know most of the industries that they work with because it's just not their background. Right. So caucuses are a way to educate members of Congress on different industries and the issues that impact the industries. So during the fly-in, we met with members of Congress. Our members came and met with them about creating a baking caucus to educate, and we would use that to educate members of Congress on the baking industry and what issues are important to us. Helps us identify who our champions are in Congress on our issues, and really, like I said, educate those members of Congress on how the baking industry works, our impact on jobs and economics and taxes within the U.S. economy. We were successful in securing. You usually have a Republican and a Democrat chair, co-chairs of a caucus because it's bipartisan, and we were successful in securing a Republican chair for that caucus, and we are reaching out and working with that office currently. And then we will be working. What you normally see is once you get one chair on one side of the aisle, they have somebody that they work with on the other side of the aisle that they'll recommend, and then we'll begin that process of securing that and getting it formally created. Once that's created, we will take next steps of probably having some education sessions for staff, congressional staff, etc. But moving forward, and thanks to the help of our members who really helped us. Absolutely. They secured the chair and others who want to support the caucus.
Yeah, it was great to see the members in action that day.
It really was. Yep.
So obviously on everyone's mind, at least in Washington, probably outside of Washington as well, is that it is an election year. And so I wondered if you had any insights in terms of legislative developments that we might anticipate, just given that dynamic.
So I'm happy to kind of kick this off. I think we've already seen Congress is really struggling to move a lot of things forward for example, appropriations. And quite frankly, we have a lot of quick deadlines coming up very quickly. We have a potential partial government shutdown in 15 days. That's if Congress can't move some of the appropriations processes forward. We have, two government funding deadlines. One is January 19th, and the second is February 2nd. We already know that because of retirements on the House GOP majority side, we will be losing 2 additional folks. So that will make the voting margins much more tight, and they've already been tight. So there's a lot of, interesting, cliffhangers, I guess, coming, is a good way to look at it. I think, from the regulatory side, as you know, once you hit probably the April window, late April, early May, hopefully significant regs that this administration is trying to push out, they will get out before that window. After that window, if there is a change in administration, the new administration after the elections can go back and, pull back and review some of those additional regulations that come out later in the 2024 year. So I think I'll be very interested to see what happens over the next couple of weeks and if we're able to start moving some things forward.
Got it.
I agree. Congress is only going to, due to the slim majorities, Congress is only going to do what they have to do and pass what they have to pass. And everything else, I think they'll kick down the road.
Okay. So in terms of member engagement in this election year, what strategies or initiatives do you recommend for our members in terms of enhancing their involvement with ABA or even more generally, just in terms of the political landscape?
I think one opportunity for our members, and we were fairly active in this space, and then, given the couple of years of pandemic, things changed. But I strongly encourage our members, we help you make those connections in Washington, D.C. with your members of Congress, but we strongly encourage you to also make those connections locally. Both with your local politicians, but also with your member of Congress at home. We can help you set up plant visits, encourage them to better understand your operations. And, having that connection is helpful, both in, if you're in a good situation or if you have some challenges. So I strongly urge our members to help facilitate that dialogue, both not just in DC, but also at home.
It's a really good point.
I agree with that. I think it's just crucially important. Now that builds on the baking caucus. What we were talking about with the baking caucus is if we can figure out who those members are that are interested in learning more about the baking industry, we will then try to place them at member locations, to tour facilities and learn more about the industry with a hands-on approach, because that's how you learn, through seeing.
Absolutely. Well, it sounds like we have a lot ahead of us and it's going to be a really interesting year. And it sounds like even just the next couple of months are going to be really interesting. So we will make sure that we keep everyone informed on those developments as they occur. But unfortunately, we are out of time for today's session. So I really just want to take a moment to thank Eric and Rasma both for joining today and sharing your insights and your feedback and expertise. I think it's really wonderful to be able to hear all of that information, very helpful information for our members. And then for our listeners, we hope that you enjoyed today's conversation, and we also value your feedback. So let us know what you thought of this show today by emailing hello@americanbakers.org. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts: Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and Ghana. And thank you for tuning in.